What's up? Welcome to a new episode of Movie Schmovie. This is episode number 351, the one that we were not sure would be here as of the last episode, but obviously we're here. We meaning us, meaning I am Steve, one of the co-hosts, and as always, I'm joined by
Ron
and John. And, Steve, I was thinking about that like we are now that we're not worried about any kind of podcast promise or any podcast curse about how many episodes we're supposed to do, We're sort of in a no man's land, or a no person's land, if you will, where it's like you could say that there are no limits, there are no promises, there are no rules. Movie Schmovie. What do you think about that? And for branding.
We see how it goes. I mean, it sounds accurate.
It does. How's everybody holding up?
Good, man. Good to see you guys. Took a bit of a break, some travel. A few of us traveled over the past couple weeks. And we're getting back at it.
We're back to our miserable lives.
Back to our miserable, we were talking about that going into the show. It's like coming off a vacation. It's like, yep, back to the grind, back to the schmovie.
Well, before you go on a vacation, it's like you're walking around and you've got like a little secret smile, no matter what happens. It's like the line's too long at the store. Somebody says, hey, will you get this file for me? One little extra thing. You have this little secret smile, something in your back pocket where you're like, I'm so far away from this. I have a vacation coming up. And then when you get back from vacation, it's like now you have like a little secret frown, which is like, I don't really know what I'm looking forward to right now. I think it's a weird thing we do to ourselves, but obviously we need the break. We need to get away.
Yeah, man.
Change of scenery. Just not being in your own house and being able to think about all the stuff you got to do around your house. It's like,
for sure.
It's like you're in a place where it's like, it's not your problem, so you can kind of detach.
You know what I'm starting to realize? Like, I guess post lockdown, man, like other places just live in a space we can always travel. It's not like every other place that I know people that live. So I have a friend that just like travels. I'm like, you travel with your kid? He's like, yeah, like that's just what we do. Yeah. It's like every couple of months, it's like, oh, let's go to Switzerland. Let's go to, like, Jesus Christ. I want to try to do that. I want to try to make traveling a part of my name, not out of the country, but like Pennsylvania or something like that. You know what I mean? Like
Switzerland or Pennsylvania, we're not sure.
I mean, they're one and the same, really. I mean, Switzerland, they think, man. Like in Switzerland, if you live there, you're equal. Like Switzerland is Pennsylvania.
Right. Yeah,
it's like our gem. Like people come to Pennsylvania, come to the States.
For sure.
People got to come over here and find out if people really pronounce their O's that way. They're like, I gotta come see this.
Yeah. They're like,
hear this.
Yeah. What is it? Mayor of Easttown is huge over there, so like they just gotta come to the filming. Gotta get to a Wawa. Get a hoagie. Yeah, man. But we got a lot going on in this episode, or at least a lot of randomness. Sure. I think, like just some catch-ups and some what have we seen. We've got the required viewing. Ronald, you last time picked. I don't know. You can remind everybody what your choice was.
The Brave Little Toaster.
Right. So we'll get into that in a bit. Was there any news at the top you guys wanted to mention to go through?
Yes.
Look at that face.
I mean, look. I don't think it gets any better. You've poisoned my mind with this Welcome to Wrexham show that is crept into my emotions. I'm so weepy every episode. So I'm like,
it's great.
Invested in Ryan Reynolds, right?
Yeah.
Then we get a bombshell in the form of a little funny teaser that Hugh Jackman will be appearing in Deadpool 3 in 2024. And then a follow-up video that kind of hints at that the story won't interfere with Logan. It won't step on the toes of Logan, which is really cool. So how you guys feeling about it?
I mean, we all love Hugh Jackman on this show, I think.
Absolutely.
I think we all also agree. Yeah, we're huge. We're huge on Hugh.
There it is. That's what I was going for.
Yeah.
But I was going to say, we also agree that him in this role is one of those little bits of superhero casting it's got the same alchemy of like Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man.
Oh,
or
yeah.
Totally.
a few of the other, big ones. And so there's this weird danger of, it's exciting to think that you could get a little bit more of that energy, but it also is coming after the perfect send-off, maybe the best superhero movie. It's in contention in my mind for best superhero movie ever, Logan.
Oh, for sure. Yeah,
So it's like, I know they must be in respect of that. I mean,
They've
I
gotta
think
be.
I think that there is a difference between saying he's going to be back as Wolverine in Deadpool 3 and saying MCU has announced that they've cast their Wolverine and it's Hugh Jackman. However, I don't think that means we won't get him as Wolverine. There's a lot of variables to this.
Yeah,
And I'll just spit a few things out and then see what you guys think. One is, who knows by 2024, by September of 2024, what they would have put in their other movies and shows to sort of pave the way for mutant stuff to come up. It's not like that'll be it's not like he's going to be in the next thing and we're going to see it tomorrow. They've got 2 years to get us ready for this. The other is, if you're going to launch the X-Men in the MCU as new characters, do you need Wolverine to be part of that initial team, to be part of that, whatever that origin story is? Or can he just be this guy who we know, he got brought over in Deadpool 3 from another universe, but now he's stuck here? Or maybe some indication that Wolverine's been around all this time and we just haven't seen him yet? I mean, does that work with any kind of unrolling of a new X-Men mythos that we've all sort of assumed that the MCU is going to do, right? Is like have a big time rolling out their new X-Men. So what do you think of all that? And how does he fit in?
I mean,
how does that fit in with what they could be planning?
He's necessary. He's necessary. Only, and I think that because, let's be honest, man. All of the franchises, I mean, have had kind of an interesting time. I won't say bad, because there has been some light in the middle of the Marvel stuff. But I think in order to win people over with the idea of the X-Men, especially fanboys and fangirls all over the world and fandoms, I think what you're going to have to do is sweeten the pot, right? X-Men is probably one of the most anticipated Marvel properties in history. Now, I mean, like, sure, Spider-Man is incredible. When X-Men comes, we're going to see a different level of fandom, just like this, kind of on the level of Spider-Man, right? Yeah. So I think in order to win them over, in order for people not to riot in the streets, you gotta have Wolverine, and you have to have a good Wolverine. And if that means securing Hugh again, if they look and they can't find a good Wolverine to replace Wolverine, just give us Hugh. If they're trying somebody new, I'm all about that. But it has to be a good person. It has to be somebody that kind of fits that role and gives us the good amount of toxic masculinity and fragility that Wolverine has. I'm a big fan.
Yeah. I mean, definitely agree. I think in general, like, I would be shocked if they don't already know who the next Wolverine is. Yeah. I think there's been rumors about people that are in the running, and I feel like Marvel probably knows who that's going to be. But I think that kind of the idea that they've been really doubling down on this whole, the 4, 5, 6 phases in terms of like multiverse stuff, and even just the playground that Deadpool is. It just seems like a great way to, you say, sweeten the pot. Yeah, like, it's just like, okay, what's something that people love? Well, they love Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. It's widely known how close, Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman are. And not to mention that Sean Levy's directing Deadpool 3, who also has a great relationship with both of those stars. There's just such synergy there that there's no way to not do this,
And Feige and Hugh.
Right, yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, he's a big part of that whole X-Men, that version of the X-Men, sure, in the 20th Century Fox of it all. Yes, like, there's a relationship there. So I think there's a no-brainer in play here, which is like, let's let these people who are like great friends and fuck around all the time and people love together, let them do something with this that's very special. And whether that's a long-term thing in the movie, or if there's a long-term play for Hugh Jackman in the MCU, who knows what that is. But knowing where the phases are going, there's very much, it feels like there's probably some version of Hugh Jackman that could be involved in the MCU for years to come. it's not the version that we saw in Logan, probably, you know, but I mean, it could be something else. And I think that's cool. And I think that, you know, again, Deadpool is a great film to mess around with that in. Those actors are great together. And that's just like, call it what it is. Like, Ryan Reynolds is a marketing machine. And, you know, the fact that we're talking about this 2 years out and there's this much excitement over it, and within, you know, 24 hours, you get 2 great videos. To think between now and then what they're gonna put out, you know, what they're gonna use to promote that movie, with everything he's done with the Deadpool franchise, and, you know, Sean Levy, who I think is a great choice for this this movie coming in. It's just a really exciting thing, and it's like, it is a marquee name to have in the MCU, Wolverine and Deadpool, and to have Ryan Reynolds be a part of the MCU is a huge asset, because he is a machine when it comes to marketing his movies, and especially that character. It's like a perfect marriage between the actor and the character and the franchise. So, you know, I was so excited to see the videos, and, you know, I'm sending it around to everybody I know that cares one iota, because it's just like, oh my God, this is happening. This is, and the logo is awesome, you know, with the Deadpool. I mean, they just know exactly what they're doing. And this is probably one of the areas where there's no question of the quality of what they could do with this film.
Yeah.
And yeah, man, super excited. Can't wait to see what they do with it 2 years down the line. We'll find out.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think that idea that they kind of need something to get us juiced at this point, because even if you've been enjoying the sort of slow drip of what they've been doing over the last few years, or the steady drip, I should say, you know that a little bit of that specialness has gone out of it, that sense of anticipation, that sense of knowing what to expect or what the next big thing is. Like, I'm extremely excited to see the next Guardians movie, but that has as much to do with James Gunn as it does the MCU. I'm really excited to see what they do with the next Ant-Man movie, and because that's going to supposedly set the stage for some of this big multiversal stuff. But even with that, and with Wakanda Forever just a couple months away, like, I have still not felt that, like, oh, the next big thing in the movies that I'm excited to see is to take my family to go see the next Marvel thing. I'm starting to feel that about some of these things, I guess. But my point being, you wonder, like, what is that thing that's going to get people kind of excited? And I think what's interesting about it being Deadpool is that of all the movies that can play around with which version of Wolverine is this, are we going to ruin the ending of Logan? I mean, he can practically turn to the camera and say, I promise we're not going to ruin Logan for you people. Trust me, you know. But I also think it would be hilarious if Wolverine does get brought back from the dead and he doesn't do much of anything or something. I was trying to think of, like, what kind of joke could they have about, like, what does it mean to make it worth your while to bring a character back like this? Because the question in our minds is, like, when does Chris Evans come back? When does Robert Downey Jr. come back? It's not hard to think that they would use that if, as you're saying, Steve, they only have so many of these, like, Hail Mary passes with, like, okay, how can we get people interested? And you don't want to see them undo everything that they've done. And I think the people that made Logan know that, and the people that are making this new thing probably know that. So yeah, it's just an interesting thing. But I agree with you, Steve. The logo is, like, part of the magic of this announcement. It's like, okay, you could feel the marketing campaign starting up already with that Deadpool mask with the 3 claw marks through it.
So awesome.
Because those two guys' real life friendship is so antagonistic, at least as far as, like, what they release, you know, the little videos. Those two characters are so perfect for that kind of one-upsmanship and making it fun. So yeah, no, I'm psyched about it too. And it is a little weird that it's 2 years out, but I guess that's the way it ought to be, right? They get us excited about something, and then they make a good thing. And it doesn't mean it's going to be good, but the pieces are in place for it to be one of those that you're just kind of excited to see. Even if you don't love the Deadpool movies, you can imagine that this one is going to be special, not just because of the Wolverine factor, but because the writers have said again and again, every little interview I've read they've been talking about the sort of fun of getting to play in the MCU proper, but still get to keep the Deadpool aesthetic. You know, one of my favorite things about the Deadpool movies is that he can just kind of go across town and knock on the door at the X Mansion. I love that feeling. So I think, you know, having a bigger board to play on and more pieces to play with seems like it would suit the Deadpool movies. So, and you're right about Ryan Reynolds being a crazy marketing machine. It's like
he is.
It's
Man.
crazy.
His cell phone company, his movies, anything he's involved in.
His gin or his tequila or whatever.
Yeah, right.
Mint Mobile.
Yeah,
like everything. And it's all.
Do
in the
you
video.
like Mint Mobile, Ron? Because we've been thinking about it.
I've been using it for 5 years.
Okay.
I love it.
Right.
I've traveled all over the world with it, and it works really well.
Okay.
Yeah. The only thing is that sometimes I forget that like whatever money is coming out from 6 months of use, like I forget about that sometimes. I'm like, oh, I paid for 6 months. Like I haven't paid a bill. Oh, the next chunk is coming out.
Yeah.
That's the only thing. But besides that, you really get used to just, it's okay to not spend a lot of money on your phone. And that's a very foreign concept for Americans, right? Like people are used to like my bill should be $120. That's how I have a good cell phone. That's how it works. And it's not like that. It doesn't have to be like that, especially since it uses T-Mobile towers. It uses towers that are their
This
mainstream.
episode brought to you by Mint Mobile.
I know. I was about to say.
Right. I mean, Ryan's done it to me, man. He's like, he's convinced me.
Well, why don't we move on to something you convinced us to do, which is to watch the movie from 1987, The Brave Little Toaster. I'd love to hear what made you choose this movie. It was on the heels of me choosing an animated from my childhood that was only from a few years before 1982, but it's interesting noticing the differences. Yeah, talk a little bit about Brave Little Toaster and why you picked it.
Brave Little Toaster was a weird thing because it was on it's like Disney adjacent. It was like Disney's video sort of releases.
Like Disney helped fund the making of it, but it didn't get made with their production imprint.
They didn't. It was
sort of like
for a while,
but and it was kind of like. It was not made in-house at Disney, and it was always kind of shunted off to the side. And I think there was a time where it was going to be the first CGI movie that Disney, like John Lasseter was supposed to be involved, and then it got shelved, and then got made the way it got made. But what's interesting is then when John Lasseter made Toy Story, he clearly still had a lot of ideas from this movie on his mind.
Clearly, and that's kind of what I was getting at. I didn't mean to I'm not slandering Toy Story. I'm just saying this is the bones of that story for sure. And it's really cool that, if somebody's like, man, I've never seen a movie like this. A movie's never, you're like, well, I have a movie that came out decades beforehand that kind of has the bones of this story. Not quite as squishy.
A decade, maybe a decade.
Yeah.
When did Toy Story come out? 94, 95?
Yeah.
Oh, Jesus,
okay.
It was 94?
So this is a full
really 94?
This is a full 8 years before that still, though.
Yeah, I feel like it was 90.
Jesus Christ.
Right? Yeah, it was something
like
wow.
That. So no, not 10 years. This 8, I mean, it makes it even weirder. But yeah, it's a cool movie. Not quite as fun. I'm gonna say that off top. It's not quite, but the music is very fun, man. Like the musicality of it is something I really thought that added something to it. Just when I was like, man, that is one of the saddest scenes I've ever seen. An uplifting song comes in and kind of swoops in and makes me feel good. But yeah, I've loved that movie forever. I kind of feel like the Brave Little Toaster. I feel like we all kind of have felt like that. Like we come into a world where it's unknown. We're very small, and you feel small at first, but then as you find your bones, you kind of figure things out. Like you could get through anything. And I always felt like the Brave Little Toaster. I was like the Brave Little Toaster, but with Blanky's personality.
So let's talk about some of what these characters are. This is, and the reason why it's so much like Toy Story is because it's what happens to the objects, the appliances, the things you use when you're not around. And we start this movie in a cabin that seems like it's been abandoned for 5 years, but it seems like it's not that far of a drive and the family likes it. So I don't know why they aren't using the cabin. But inside the cabin, there's a vacuum cleaner, a lamp, a toaster, an electric blanket, and a radio that are all sort of anthropomorphized and talking to each other, and it's a little bit like Andy from Toy Story in that they are missing their owner, but they keep calling them the master, which is very strange.
Very strange. Yeah,
and it's a little culty, but it's and I guess it's missing that element in Toy Story. It always felt like we were commenting on the notion that Woody is a little too into Andy. This movie doesn't really get into that idea. It's mostly just sort of presented unironically that they love their owner because they got used. Even though it's weird that they talk like they got played with, but it's like the vacuum cleaner and the lamp got played with, the toaster got played with. It's a little fuzzy, but it's still it's that same concept of Toy Story, is that like when someone shows up or turns and looks, they have to act normal, but then the rest of the time they can. In fact, they worked out like a mobile battery situation for their adventure that is very sophisticated. Yeah. I like how the cable, particularly the vacuum cleaner Kirby, his electrical cable could be extended to be like 100 feet long if needed.
Yes.
Or it's like a few inches long,
How did you feel about the murder-suicide that the air conditioner was attempting to do in the house for no reason? He's just like, I can't take this shit. Murder-suicide. We're all going to go. I'm going to kill myself. You'll die with me.
The air conditioner with the voice of Jack Nicholson as performed by Phil Hartman.
Right.
Which makes it even stranger.
Which is so... the choices that they make in some of these scenes are just... too adult sometimes. I feel like, could I show this to my daughter, when she gets to a point where she could watch it? And I don't know if I could like show it to her like 4, maybe 7.
I feel like 7 or 8 would be about the right age, but if they're sophisticated, maybe even younger than that. Because I feel like if you get too old, this movie is going to fall prey to the same thing you experienced with The Last Unicorn, Ron, which is like, it's going to feel too slow. It's going to feel too of another time. It's going to feel, the pace is going to feel a little herky-jerky. Like, this is a movie that moves pretty fast, but somehow still does feel a little long at 90 minutes. Yeah. And I think the musical moments, for me, always felt like, oh yeah, this is like a punctual, like one of those music, you're watching an animated movie and it gets to another song and you go, okay, I can tell we've got this much more movie left. But no, I do think that would be the main thing, and it's like, I don't know what it is. I can't really put my finger on it. What it is about older movies, that the pacing, the way they move from scene to scene, the performing, it's just different, and it's like it's hard to picture a younger audience unless like I said, you play it for them when they're so young that their tastes aren't formed yet. It's hard to picture them not thinking this just feels old. Even if it didn't look a little old, you know what I mean? I can't quite say what I'm trying to say.
One of the things that makes it feel old is like sitcom transitions. So like, this is very common in old movies, especially The Last Unicorn in this one. Like somebody will say something like, and then he took all my money. And then it'll sit on that moment and it'll transition, like fade to the next scene, which is like an applause break, legitimately a applause break that is built into a cartoon. That was like, I guess this was like when older sort of producers were making stuff. They're like, yeah, that applause break right there, because they're gonna laugh at this joke. This is gonna be funny. And it just kind of sits there for longer than it should, and then it kind of that slow fades into the next scene. There's like 10 of those in this movie. And that's one of the things that I really did. I don't remember even seeing in the last like 10 years or so.
I think
maybe even more.
Like that kind of ending a scene and kind of fading out, but not necessarily ending a scene, ending a moment wherever the scene ends. And so that it's as though the characters then freeze and then it slowly fades to another scene. And I think, you're right. Both movies have like then a little musical interlude sometimes. Yeah. Before it gets back to the characters. I did think that like, it was fun hearing, like I think John Lovitz and Phil Hartman both in this were before, I think they recorded it around the time they were starting to do Saturday Night Live. So it's like, they were picked up because they went to the Groundlings, the sketch troupe, to like find voice performers for this, which is very smart because it does have, again, for 1987, it does feel like it's got some kind of like modern comic rhythms for that time. And I think I read that John Lovitz recorded all of his parts in one day because he had to go off. He was working on SNL. He was too busy. And so all of his stuff was done in one day, which is why, and this is why I looked it up, which is why if you notice, he doesn't sing His parts are not. It's a different voice. Someone kind of doing a John Lovitz impression. And I noticed that it wasn't John Lovitz singing, and I looked that up, and it's because like they literally had him for one full day marathon session, you know, to do all that stuff. So that's pretty crazy. I guess it kind of helps that his character is like disjointed from reality, so it doesn't matter if it doesn't quite sound like he's talking to the other characters. But anyway, well, I would say just another thing that, you know, not to always compare it to The Last Unicorn, but I did have that in my mind when I watched this. I think it also represents, when you're watching it, you feel, even though this was funded by Disney and at times could have been a Disney thing, it's a different approach from The Last Unicorn, but it has that same feel of like, oh, this is somebody trying to make a good, nice looking animated movie, but it's not Disney. You're getting something that didn't go through all the Disney filters, and that might mean a certain amount of like quality control, but it also means a certain kind of homogenization of characters and themes and ideas. And there's a few jokes in this that might not have made it through if it were a Disney thing. I don't know what the climate like was at the time. But I don't know. I didn't know if you guys thought about that. Just the fact that, you know, it's still, like nowadays we've got a few different houses making animated movies that are on a certain level, but at the time it was like anyone who wasn't Disney sort of was trying to establish themselves as some kind of an alternative to Disney, and this movie definitely feels like it's another attempt to like do something that does feel a little different than the, you know, the Disney style.
Yeah, I think it definitely, like, I don't know, there was like a crop of those movies that came out in the 80s and early 90s that just, you know, could have been, should have been, would have been a Disney movie, you know, but for whatever reason weren't, or were just like a different animation house or whatever. But like a lot of them consistently, I feel like probably you could really tell that they were able to kind of be a little darker, you know, a little less kind of like pleasant all the time, or, you know, kind of, you know, certain kinds of jokes like you're saying, or like that's probably that's the through line with those films that were outside of the Disney house, was that, you know, because of that quality control, or like that branding, that kind of control over what the messaging could be in the film, or even just the, you know, the kind of jokes or the kind of subject matter. And you kind of still see that in some ways. I mean, definitely in some of the Pixar movies, you know, they pushed that a little more, but you know, this is one, you know, I think of that, and I think of like Land Before Time, and even like Last Unicorn, like a lot of the bigger movies that came out in our, you know, relative childhood or teen years, like there are ones that stand out as being, you know, well, those are definitely not Disney movies because the subject matter is a little darker, or it's like not the best ending, you know, it kind of still ends on kind of a downer, even though it's a little more hopeful. Like even this movie ending, you know, the sacrifice he makes, you know, the idea that he's still being put back together, you know, is optimistic that he's able to, you know, restore him, but it's still kind of like he still looks pretty rough, you know what I mean? Like it's not like riding off as like the best toaster on the market, you know what I mean?
Well, he threw himself into the gears of like a car smasher machine to save his friend. So I think that to save the little boy who loved making toast in him.
Hey
man, we all have our reasons, John. You know what I mean? Like,
hey man,
that's his function, and somebody was using him appropriately.
Yeah,
and that's all that mattered. You know what I mean? Like,
we all want to be used appropriately by the master.
Master. He kept saying it over and over again.
It's the master. The master comes. Did you notice they had little insults for each other too? I wrote down just a few of them.
Yes.
Dial face, slot head, and then also this is a whole line. This is the kind of line that you get in a 1987 movie. Just period. Pipe down, carpet breath.
It's a good one.
That's good one. Any writer for kids, you know, like that is like the kind that is it. That was the stuff they wrote for us.
That's it.
Well, I was like, I would have been 14 or so when this came out. Yeah, 14. So I had aged out of. I still tried to see most animated movies because I was always kind of an animation nerd. But I never saw this one before this. So I was actually. Wow. I mean, I knew all about it.
What?
And I knew that it was like an animated movie that some people had carried forward, but I think if it had come out 2 years earlier, I definitely would have seen it. And if it had come out a few years later, I probably would have seen it, because I was in both cases kind of either a kid, or I was like a film buff who was like, oh, it's something new and animated, I'll go see it. But for whatever reason, it slipped through the cracks for me. I think it would have been one of those things when you're 14 or 15, if you don't see it within a couple of weeks of it coming out, you might not see it. And then I don't know if this was the kind of thing I would have rented when I was like dating and stuff in high school. So I just don't think it would have been on the radar. But it was interesting seeing it, because I think I had a very similar journey to what you had with The Last Unicorn, Ronald, which is like I could definitely see the craft of it, but it was missing for me that magic of the childhood association, but which I know I would have had if I'd been the right age for this. It's like that was my jam, the idea of like what's happening in the house when you're not there, and all the characters going on an adventure, and the way that everyone kind of teams up. And you even had the sort of comic relief class clown kind of character of John Lovitz doing the radio, and I mean all that stuff. I know it would have been totally right down the middle for me, but because it wasn't, I was able to see it with a little bit more of a just an eye for the kind of the filmmaking of it. And I really did think, oh yeah, this is better than TV animation of the time, not as slick as like Don Bluth or Disney, and therefore it occupies that kind of special place for me of just of, you know, I love animated movies that are in that spot. I mean, as much as we've talked about Disney product on this show, and as much as we love of it, there is something that kind of polishing that they do sort of takes the soul out of stuff just a little bit, or it makes it such a surefire thing that it squeezes out something rough that you get in something like this. And so, I think that like, and did you notice the pedigree of this? Joe Ranft, who is like one of the co-creators of this as a movie, he was a Pixar animator and writer, and also he did the voice of the repairman guy in this, or the guy who was like, I like how he didn't need to lie to customers and say he just got a shipment of stuff in, but he would like say, oh, I just got a shipment of blender motors in. Let me go back and get a blender motor for you. And then he would cold murder a blender.
Yes.
And then go out and put it in a box and say, oh, it's the last one we have in stock. I feel like he could be honest and say, I think I've got a blender with a motor. Let me go get it for you. Anyway, but that character was voiced by Joe Ranft, who also did the voice of the little penguin in the Toy Story movies. You know, Lenny, the penguin who's got the little rattly throat. So
that's really cool.
I recognized his voice, and I was like, can I be right about this? But I think that's something that the Pixar movies have done a lot of, is like use animators and directors for vocal talent. So
two things bother me about that scene: the red marshmallows or pinkish marshmallows, which I've never seen in my life, and then like the way that he murders that blender, and he pulls the plug, and they just pull their plug into the carriage. Well, I was like, oh no, I don't want to. Yeah, it's just a dark sort of thing that keeps happening during the course of the movie.
Well, also, that blender's the only one that gets done that way, though. That blender's like the little shoes in Roger Rabbit that get dipped in the stuff. It's like, this is the one that really gets murdered, and there's no like cutting back to them, and you see that they're still moving or something like that. This is the cold-blooded murder.
It was pretty bad. And the kid was going to get murdered. The master was going to get murdered. Yeah. It had no limits in terms of like who the villain was going to attack. So I kind of love that about it. But yes, I could see why you would feel that way about this movie if you didn't experience it, really young.
But it also like Toy Story 3 is still borrowing from this movie with the trash compactors, or the trash burning scene, because not only is it like the danger of it, but in this movie I feel like it's maybe 2 or 3 times where the characters do that thing they do in Toy Story 3 of like, well, we're gonna die, like when they're all sinking in the mud. They each one kind of accept their fate as they go down, and it's like it's a little bit of that deep kind of stuff that we give Toy Story 3 credit for, which is having them accept their mortality for a second.
Of all the characters, it always makes me super teary for some reason. The blanket's like, I'm not scared.
I know.
Like, I'm like, what? Like, it is a heavy, like this, they called him a wimp. They called him a loser. Everybody's like, oh my God, I'm going to die. It's just like, I'm not scared. It fucks with me, man. It's like,
I made a note of that too, because it's like you would think that he would be saying, oh my God, I don't want to die. But instead he's like,
yeah, whatever comes, son.
That's how it is out on these streets.
Yes. Sometimes you die in a pool of what was that?
Whatever that
Quicksand?
was. Yeah, I said mud, but yeah, it's basically bubbling stuff.
Yeah, yeah. But anyway, yeah, I love that movie. It's crazy how much I've watched it. I used to watch it tape constantly.
So what do you think about the fact that there's a scene where the toaster kills a flower by telling it the truth?
This is what I'm saying. Like,
it's like, no, I don't feel that way about you, flower. And he walks away, and the flower just goes meow, and loses a petal, and it's like the toaster just goes shit and walks away.
Yeah, man. It's a lot of weird stuff like that.
Well, you know, the weirdest scene is the scene with the worm and the frogs and the fish, because I can't tell what's going on there. It seems like the fish is rescuing the worm from the bird so that he can eat it.
Yeah.
But then he lets it go. And so it's like, well, was this an altruistic fish all this time that just wanted to save the worm's life? I thought everybody wanted to eat the worm, and that was what was happening. But it turns out that the frogs and the fish are both like, hey, not our worm. If they don't want that hawk being the one to eat it, you know.
Last thing about that scene, that happens, but they're also doing an iteration of the song that the appliances just did. How the fuck did they hear that song? They're not even in the same section, and it's almost like I was like, are they gonna die? Is that why? It was very strange to me. Anyway.
Did you think about any of that when you saw it as a kid, Ronald?
No.
And that's as it should be.
Well,
yes, right.
That particular scene, no. But everything else I kind of did think. The blanket thing has forever made me cry for some reason. Like forever. I think it's something about like, you know, that acceptance thing is just heavy, especially for like somebody you wouldn't expect. It's like, oh man, this is.
And you know what that is, right? That's him trying to give everybody else a sense of security because he's okay.
Oh my God.
That blanket. That's that secure little blanket.
Security blanket.
It's okay, guys. It's
gonna be
man. And nobody would even snuggle with him the night before. Nobody would snuggle with him. Everybody said, "Fuck off."
Fuck him. Yeah.
And it's even to the point where the lamp is like, "I noticed you're being nice to him," and he's like, "Yeah," and he's like, "Why are you doing that?"
Yeah. Why are you being like? And he called him a wimp.
Yeah, no, that was Kirby, the vacuum cleaner, who said
Kirby
that.
The vacuum cleaner.
And I guess as long as I'm being a nerd about the voices, you notice that that's the voice of the guy who sings "You're a Mean One, Mr. Grinch," and he also is like Tony the Tiger from the Frosted Flakes commercials. Yeah. Oh, you want to know what his name is? If you don't know, he's got the best name. Like, this is like, if you were a voice actor from the early days of animation into the 80s, what name do you need? You need the name, where is it? Thurl Ravenscroft. That's a fucking cool name.
He sounds like he should be in Harry Potter.
Thurl. Thurl.
The craziest name I've ever heard.
Ravenscroft. Yeah, it's like, that sounds like you must have a castle somewhere if your name's Ravenscroft.
It's a house, in Game of Thrones.
Right.
Right.
Ravenscroft. That's nuts.
All right, Steve, what's our next required viewing? I think you're next in the rotation.
Oh my God, guys, you put me on the spot here. I was like realizing, oh shit, I'm next. Let me think here. Give me a second. I'm coming up with this on the spot. Should I keep with the movies from our youth, like those kinds of family movies that are kind of scary or spooky? It is October. Well, it'll be October by then. You know, I've been wanting to rewatch this because I don't even, when did this come up? It was something about the guy who plays one of the leads in it. Like, where are they now? I saw recently, and the character's name is Atreyu, and the movie's called The Neverending Story. And maybe it's because I've been thinking about Stranger Things recently, but
you fucking with me, man. You fucking with me. You fucking with me right now.
What do you mean? What do you mean?
I like just watched the German cut of that. Like,
oh really?
Just watched it. I can't wait. I'll watch it again.
Yeah. Because I was like, the guy who played Atreyu, like, is, lives an interesting life, it seems. But when we saw it, I made a comment about it, and Sydney was like, "Well, what is that movie?" And I was like trying to explain it to her in the broadest of terms, because that's like, it's not a cartoon, it's a live action movie. But I don't know. I haven't seen that in a long time, and sure, I guess I'll just. It's not animated. I couldn't think of anything animated on the spot, but
Yeah. Can I tell you something crazy about the German cut? You know that song is in the U.S. version. It's only in the U.S. version.
Oh wow!
So when you watch the beginning of the German thing, it's just the never-ending story and then wind blowing. There's no clouds. There's no yeah. I was so pissed.
But I remember, I don't know. I haven't seen it in forever. And
wait, why were you pissed? Why did you have to watch the German version?
Oh, so there's a 4K. So they upgraded it to a 4K, and I wanted to see what it looked like. I'm like, this movie. There's a random like ET Easter egg in that movie. A lot of people talk about that. It's a weird movie, man.
We should save that for the show.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Save the Easter egg. I mean,
yeah.
But speaking of just the way we watch these movies, or what version you watch, we should also mention that the Brave Little Toaster is not like readily available on a bunch of streamers or a bunch of services, and I guess I don't get that. Like, it seems like this of all the movies would be just have a permanent home on Amazon or Netflix or something.
Disney has gone in and out of claiming it, and I can't figure out why. It might be some legal issues with the prop, like who owns it, who doesn't own it.
The master owns it.
The master owns it. Yeah. First time I watched it was actually on the Disney Channel, so like I don't know where it kind of sits in terms of ownership right now. And that may have something to do with it. But hopefully maybe it'll show up on Disney Plus at some point. Yeah.
It's gotta be some sort of like
it has to be some legal.
It's gotta be some legal thing because the sequels are on Disney Plus.
Yeah.
But like
the
OG is not.
I've never seen any sequels. I've never seen like Brave Little Toaster Goes to Mars and all that stuff.
To Mars and to the Rescue. Yeah, I think they were at some point, but I'm pretty sure
that's really cool
on Disney Plus.
But it's gone for like ever. It's like they'll be like Disney's on DVD, Disney's Brave Little Toaster, and then it'll disappear, and then you'll look it up, and it's like they're not claiming it anymore, and then it'll show up. It is weird, man. It's a weird sort of dipping in and out that movie does.
Yeah, maybe it simply has to do with like the bad mojo that Disney had with its production.
You know what I mean? That makes sense.
You would think that in time that would go away, especially because it's a pretty beloved film, I think. But I don't know.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, I don't know. Let's watch the Neverending Story. It's it's kind of, I feel like it falls in a similar conversation, and I feel like in and out for the past few months, it's come up enough, especially like, again, I was trying to say like Stranger Things, kind of having that zeitgeisty moment with Running Up the Hill and like people talking about how the prior season had the Neverending Story moment and things like that. So it's like been on my mind and it just keeps popping up on random things. And like I said, maybe that's a sign that I should watch it and we can watch it together. So we'll do that next.
Hearing them singing it on Stranger Things, like, warmed my heart because I remember when nobody fucked with that movie, and then like over the years it's become like this huge thing.
I mean, I was obsessed with it as a kid. Like I loved that movie.
I read the book
all the time.
I read the book when it goes to the special world. The text is upside down.
Yep.
And in another color. Like,
yep.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
It's just a special kind of story. So.
And I haven't seen it though. Like I said, like a lot of these conversations we're having, these going back to them, I haven't seen it in a bit, and I feel like I saw it. I don't know. Maybe did I go see that in the theater? They had like maybe like a special event type thing in one of the theaters. I might have seen it like when I was maybe in my late 20s. I feel like I saw it in the theaters, but I don't know. I try to see those like when they come back in theaters as much as possible because they look, pretty cool on the big screen. Cool. All right. Well, that'll be next. So what are we going to move on to? I mean, are we going to go through like what we've seen recently? I mean, is there anything topically? I
mean, it's like we were, I know we were trying to keep this one lean and mean, and we're coming up on, a nice little runtime. If anybody just wants to rattle off some stuff they've seen, or we could maybe tease some stuff that we could talk about in a future episode. I feel like I've seen a bunch of things, but You know, I don't know. We haven't really discussed it, so I don't know what anyone else has seen.
Maybe I'm okay with just mentioning a few things. I mean, I know we've talked about it in and out in some of the threads. Like, I've been trying to catch up on some shows that I had. And I think all of us have seen the reboot so far. I mean,
Yes.
the episodes that have been out.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we could go through that a little bit. What do you guys think of that show?
Perfection.
I mean, it's
Perfection.
It's like a bunch of pros doing a sitcom that's got like a clear concept and a hook to it, and it feels like they can be meta without being too cute about it. And it's like we were talking about in our text thread about, like I was saying, Paul Reiser is like legit great, like sitcom ninja. He knows exactly what he's doing with every little mannerism as far as conveying a character. I think there's plenty of people on this show. Judy Greer, Keegan-Michael Key. They're all in that place. Johnny Knoxville is holding his own by kind of playing himself, but a lot of the affection we have for Johnny Knoxville kind of feeds into our affection for this character. I just think it's like, it might be down the middle, and in some ways it might be kind of a basic sitcom, but in some other ways it's like, it's that fun of watching the craft of a sitcom. It feels current, it feels of today, but it also feels like it's just a classic. Like, it was a great, we've been able to see, I think, the whole first season, the screeners, and it was just one of the easiest binges. Like, it's one of those shows that you just go through like a knife through butter. When you get the rhythm of it, you're like, oh, I could watch this. You could easily watch another episode of this right now, you know? So,
it's great.
So no, I enjoyed the hell out of it. And it's very funny too. That's the other thing, is a lot of times with sitcoms, they miss the sort of comedy sequence thing. And this show had me laughing hard. Maybe the hardest laugh I had was Keegan-Michael Key's scene in the basketball game, how that goes. But there was a moment where I was laughing pretty darn hard. A little montage.
Really good.
No, it is very funny. And I think that's like, I think also, like, personally, I like the behind the scenes of making the show. Like, I feel like especially the making of a show that's supposed to be better than the than the source sitcom, like that's what everybody says. Well, I think that's the motivation. So I think it's funny to see, you know, them trying to reboot something that, you know, had a fandom and, you know, had an audience that loved it for the sitcom of that time, but now they're all like wanting something more from it. And I don't know, like the cast is great, and it moves at such a clip that like you're just going through the episodes. You're like, oh, on to the next one. But I also like that it's on Hulu, and like it can be kind of raunchy, it can kind of be explicit. You know, it doesn't like pull the punch of like, you know, the safety of the sitcom that it's rebooting. You know what I mean? Like, it's really funny to kind of get that behind the scene.
Like, it's surprisingly so at a couple of moments where you're like, oh shit, I'm not watching a sanitized sitcom at all. But it does still fits that like 25-minute whatever format, you know.
Yeah, it's fun, man.
There's a show that it reminds me of so much, and you would not believe what I'm gonna say, but the Muppets remake. The show called Muppets that came out 6 or 7 years ago. It's literally almost the same premise, kind of the same sort of like behind the scenes thing, except Miss Piggy is trying to kind of rebrand herself.
Right.
It's tonally like it's so good, and I think that because it kind of took sort of this sort of comedy angle, I think that people aren't ready to see the Muppets kind of in these adult situations and kind of more adult jokes. And
I remember when that came on, that some people were like,
I was a huge fan of it.
I knew some people that liked it, but I also did hear people saying that it didn't click because it was not how people wanted to see the Muppets, which is is funny because they started out as like, I mean, that the idea of them as children's characters is not necessarily the way they've always been handled. Like Jim Henson started off doing stuff for SNL, you know, around the same time that he was starting what we would consider the Muppets. So he was, they're malleable in that way, I guess, as characters. Anything else like movies? Has anyone else been to see any movies or anything?
I don't think I've seen anything in the theater.
I haven't really seen anything either.
I've been watching. It's mainly TV. Like the other show I wanted to mention was I think I'm maybe one behind. I think we have access to the season, but I've been watching it with Aaron just like as they've aired. But the Apple TV Plus show Bad Sisters, Sharon Horgan's new series.
I watched the first 2 episodes, and I really love it. And I think I just been waiting for a time that Aaron and I can watch together. But cool ass premise, incredible acting, super funny. I'm really enjoying it. How far along are you?
Like I said, I think I'm caught up. I think there's maybe one episode that came out a couple days ago or whatever that I haven't watched yet. But yeah, like, you know, you just like kind of like a fun little mystery of like, you know, what actually happened. You know, it's the kind of thing where like the show, the event happens in the pilot, you know, where, you know, something happens to somebody, and each episode is kind of stepping back and kind of piecing together what happened and what involvement these sisters had. But you know, and the lead, the guy who the thing happens to in the first episode, he's just like despicable. And you know, you just like, well, yeah, like what horrible thing happened to him and who did it, and like why didn't they do it sooner, kind of thing. Like he's just like a horrible. It's the guy who was in that Dracula series on Netflix, Klaus Bang. He was in the Dracula series on Netflix. He was also in the Northman earlier this year. If you saw that,
what was he in the Northman?
He was
he the bad guy?
Yes,
the one that was. Oh no, that was him.
Fjorn, what the fuck was his full name?
I don't want to give it up. The one that did the thing that he did when he did it. You know, that guy, that motherfucker.
Fjolnir the Brotherless. He was in the Northman. I mean, he's great in this show too. Like he's fucking good at being like, he's like, you know, he's got that relationship with his wife, who's one of the sisters, where like she's so dependent on him, and he's so manipulative, and he's such a horrible man. But like the sisters just like see through it all and just have this idea of how to take him down. And you're just like, well, how did it happen? Like, how did they do it? You know, did they do it? You know, is a question of what actually even happened. But it's great. I mean, and Sharon Horgan is, I mean, you know, anything she's involved with, I want to see. But the cast in general is really good. One of the other Gleason sons is in it. He's one of the if you saw the first few episodes, like he's like the life insurance guy.
Oh yes.
Brian Gleason.
He's a Gleason?
He's Brendan Gleason's other son.
Get the fuck out.
That's what everybody calls him, is he's the other one.
the other one.
He was in that Frank of Ireland series on Amazon Prime. Did you watch that?
Okay.
Yeah, that was great. That was great too. But yeah, I don't know. I'm loving Bad Sisters. I've been like trying to tell people about it. Anybody like, hey, Apple TV, they got a quality thing going on there. Like all their shit is like good at least. Yeah. And this is a really good show. So definitely think you guys should check it out.
I just finished catching up on For All Mankind. Speaking of Apple TV Plus, that's another one that's like, it surprises you with the quality level that it achieves sometimes with its effects or its atmosphere or just what they're putting into it. And even it's kind of a soapy show, and it's definitely the definition of a show that's like, there's certain plot lines you're going to be more invested in than others, and there's going to spend time with certain characters where you're like, I don't care as much about this but overall, like they always come to some place at the end of a season where it's like a big moment or a big sequence that's not quite like something they've done before. Right. And they always leave me at the end of a season ready for, I can't wait to see the next jump forward, because they kind of jump forward every season, about 10 years. 10 years. And it's like the alternate history that starts off as like just a branch in the history becomes this total alternate. It's a sci-fi scenario almost, or it's like, I don't know what you call it, when I guess alternate history, but it is a bit of a futuristic scenario because some of the technology is more advanced in the 80s or 90s on this show, because the space program was just more important from the 60s onward. Yeah. And so it's like the effects of what would happen if the government was putting maybe too much money into space exploration, you know, like that's not a question that we will ever see the answer to in our real world. But that's a show that I've been enjoying lately. Cool. I've been keeping up with Reservation Dogs. I feel like that's another show that like has continued to kind of wow me in its second season. I'll just rattle off some movies that I've seen, just because I've seen a bunch recently that are good. I liked Confess Fletch. We talked about See How They Run. We were going to talk about that on the show at some point, but I enjoyed that one. I thought Vengeance was okay. I enjoyed Breaking. The John Boyega performance in
nice.
that is
I wanna see
You
insane.
that.
watched all of these?
I Love My Dad, the Patton Oswalt kind of cringe fest, and it is exactly that. It's almost unpleasantly cringy as it goes along. I also made it out to the theater to see Pearl and Barbarian, two new horror movies that are getting
nice.
talked around.
I want to see both of those.
Yeah.
What'd you think of both of those?
I mean,
no spoilers for Barbarian.
spoilers.
no. In fact, I will say this about
my
Barbarian. People talk about it. The part of the hype of Barbarian is don't talk about what happens in it, and the trailers have been very good about keeping it. You know, no one's talking about what happens in this movie. I would say what makes it noteworthy, though, is not so much the scenario or what's revealed, because it might remind you of other movies you've seen. What is unique about this movie is that it feels almost like a Tarantino movie or something in the way that it's structured, the way that like the timeline works, and the way that you pick up with a character and then you see another character and you see how those things might connect, and it's formally a very bold movie. Plot wise, it's not trying to reinvent anything. It kind of gets. It's like the fear it gets out of you is a very real kind of primal fear that, like, I feel like any audience member would tap into some version of "don't go in there," that kind of feeling you get. You know? So in that sense, it's definitely a ride, and that's why I feel like it's amazing that so many people have been respecting the "let's not talk about this movie," because it's not that much of a. You couldn't really spoil it that much if you knew more. It's just that it's really fun watching a movie. If I'm reading a book, sometimes I don't read the flap, because I just assume, if I know I'm going to read it, then I'd love the surprise. And this is a movie that I feel like people should receive that way. Pearl, I mean, the more I think about it, the more I really, really, really like this movie. Like I didn't when X ended, I didn't want a prequel to it. I thought that the little trailer they tacked on to the end of X for this movie didn't really look like a movie I was that interested in seeing. But between the two of them, Mia Goth and Ty West, the star and kind of co-writers and director of this movie, have created something in this character of Pearl that really is, like, in terms of the slasher movie landscape, it really is something new. And it really is like a character who's scary in a unique way. And Mia Goth just destroys this movie. I mean, she's incredible in it. And everyone else is like pitch perfect too. Honestly, it's my favorite Ty West movie, maybe since House of the Devil, but definitely since The Innkeepers. You know, like I liked Innkeepers more than most, but to me this was like, oh yeah, this is the kind of movie that I pictured Ty West might be making when I fell in love with House of the Devil. It's just a really assured movie, and it is a slow burn, but it has enough going on in it that's just kind of creepy that I don't feel like you get that sense that you're waiting too long. And the thing it has up on X is that the kills, I feel like, consistently, whereas in X I felt like there were a couple of really memorable creative kills and then a few that I can't even remember how somebody died or what happened to them. In Pearl, the deaths are all very like different from each other and distinct, and all very much part of a character-based plot line that I just don't think you often see in this type of movie. In some ways, it's a really old-fashioned movie that then turns into a slasher film, kind of. But no, I really enjoyed Pearl a lot.
I just wanted to mention two things. One, not since Succession have I seen a show that is hitting on all cylinders the way that fucking industry is hitting on all cylinders. I know that people aren't talking about it, and I gotta be honest, I think it's because it's it's young African American lady in London, and I don't know, people have this thing where like, oh, it might be too. This woman is incredible. Mahala Harold is her name. She's Harper. She was working at a hedge fund in London, and it's kind of about no, it's a bank actually that does investments, and it's just about her life as a person that transitions from New York to London. And this is kind of fleshing out her character in the second season, because you kind of saw that she had the guts to do what she's doing in the industry, but season 2 really fleshes out who she is as a person, and everybody else that's in the story. It's just a really well-told story that really brings itself together in the second season. It's like a culmination of all this tension that existed in the first season, and it's just chef's kiss. Second thing I want to talk about is a movie from 2013 that was just released by Shout Factory that I think may be one of the best horror remakes of all time. I didn't believe in remakes until I saw this movie. And then I forgot about them. And then I remember this movie again. I'm like, oh, you know what? Remakes aren't so bad. If Evil Dead 2013 didn't exist, I wouldn't believe in them. This movie is beautiful. And Sony gave Shout Factory a 4K transfer that is just crispy and beautiful. It's just perfection. I mean, apparently it's pretty close to the 2018 Blu-ray that came out. It doesn't have any new features. It has those features, but the picture is incredible. You won't see a more crispy version of the 2013 masterpiece Evil Dead. I mean, I forgot how much it centered around addiction and stuff like that. And the cool things that they do that really pay homage but really add on to the legacy of this movie. The series just really, I'm so sad that they didn't make a second one, especially after freshly watching how brutal this one was. How brutal. It was so brutal. No one was safe. Evil Dead 2013, released by Shout Factory, is beautiful.
It's kind of the way you do a remake, too, because it's like...
For sure.
It doesn't try to top the original at its game. It does it does like, what if you were making the original, later, I guess it was 30 years later, but with like that sensibility, but it kept alive I guess maybe it's because that Sam Raimi aesthetic, what we love about it is just the sort of the anarchic sensibility behind it, and the kind of what you said, nobody's safe, creative camera work, some shit's gonna hurt, some creative gore. There's like that template is sort of an evergreen template, and there's a lot of fun to be had. And I think that's as gruesome as a movie is, as you've said, and as dark as it is also kind of, it's got that roller coaster ride aspect to it that I think is very true to the Sam Raimi idea behind the original of just giving an audience a thrill. So I love that movie. Aren't they kind of following it up? Isn't there an Evil Dead sequel that's set in a high rise that's supposed to be kind of picking up in that aftermath or something?
Yeah, Evil Dead Rises or Rise.
Yeah.
I think Lee Cronin's directing it. But yeah, that's definitely it's coming out like soon or
isn't that HBO Max?
It was going to be an HBO Max, but they bumped it to theatrical, which I guess is a sign of confidence in the movie.
Yes, they announced all those movies. That was in that sort of bunch of movies. That's cool, man. I'm down to see it. This is totally unrelated, but related. How jazzed or not jazzed are you about the new Halloween coming out? I just want to close the podcast. How are you feeling as we get closer to the third and final installment of this trilogy?
I am excited I have some friends who we watched the second one together, and I think we're planning on watching the third one together. So it'll be like pizza and beers and watching a movie with friends. So I'm super excited about seeing this movie in that way. The movie itself, I feel like it's such a crapshoot. Like, I'm interested to know what it is, but every time they open their mouths about it, it's like half tantalizing and half worrying. So I don't know. I mean, I feel like that team that's made these movies, maybe they would have been better off just making a really solid single film,
like a slasher or something,
like a solid slasher entry, kind of the way 2018 was in a way. But I feel like, I don't know, like at the end of this trilogy, we'll be able to look at their choices and see what they kind of had in mind. But you keep hearing about how they've changed their mind so many times, and I don't know. I just don't know what to expect from this movie at all. I know there was some talk about, maybe some kind of copycat Michael. People are analyzing the trailer, saying, is this really him or not? I sort of hope it doesn't go down that road 100%, but I'm not one of those people who hates the Friday the 13th where it's not Jason. I feel like it's a trashy movie, but it's kind of a fun one. I like Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, even though it's not a Michael Myers entry. So I don't know. I'm open for a very creative movie, but I find so often when you hear that these people, oh, we have a take, oh, we've got a great take. So often when I watch the movie, I'm like, I don't know what the fucking take is. Like even Halloween 2018, all the talk about, oh, they had this great take, this pitch. I still don't know what their take is exactly. The more they do, the less sure of what their take is that I feel like I have a hold of. So yeah, but as far as like, am I psyched for it? I'm super psyched for the experience of watching what could be, even if it's a humorously weird or bad movie, I'll be watching it in an environment that makes that fun, so
yeah, I'm really excited to see it. I mean, Halloween Kills, I didn't think was like wasn't like a great Halloween movie, but it was a lot of fun to watch, like kind of John's getting at, so however I end up seeing this one, I would say it's not a good sign, and we just a little inside baseball here, it's not a good sign that when we get an invitation to a screening for a movie that like there's an embargo of like the night before release at like 11 p.m. Sure. Like, not to get into details, but like it's not usually a sign of confidence, in terms of reviews, or sometimes in terms of reviews or quality of the movie. So that worries me a little bit to see that, because I feel like people were seeing Halloween 2018 early, and talking about it early. Yes. And that's what kind of propelled that movie to being like the big hit that it was. But I mean, I think they'll all be successful. Like, I'm here for Jamie Lee. I'm excited to see more of her in this movie, because it seems like she's going to be in a lot of this movie, unlike she was in Halloween Kills.
Right.
Yeah. Like the idea of that whole like separating everything for that entire movie was kind of interesting take, if that's the take. But it was I didn't personally love that, because I think that's really the whole. That's what I want to see in these Halloween movies. If that's what they're doing, like if they're using Laurie Strode and they're using Jamie Lee to do all this promotion, and she's out there like basically banging the drum as hard as she can for this final movie everywhere she goes. I love her, and I love this movie. I love the franchise, the characters. I'm excited to see how they end it. I mean, and it's just a weird road it's taken to get to it, because it does seem like, with the one in 2018, that maybe there was something cool happening, and then I kind of lost a little momentum, but maybe they can regain it. And this trilogy on a higher note, because I would love that. And anytime I can see a Halloween movie in October is a plus. And, so I'm excited to see it.
So, the one thing I've picked up on is that Jamie Lee seems to be playing a slightly more like upbeat version of Laurie in this, like that she's not as tortured and obsessed with Michael as she was in the first, like in 2018. I don't know what to call that movie, which is interesting to think that it's a few years after her daughter was murdered by Michael that she would be more chill with him than she was after 40 years of just some people she knew dying. But no, I feel like that was a real choice. Maybe that was their take.
That was the interesting thing.
That Laurie's been like dealing with trauma this whole time, and that she never got over that night. I feel like in some ways they paid that off, but also there's a part of me that never quite liked that idea. Like I always felt like a stronger Laurie who'd gone on and lived her life is more inspiring to me and more in line with that character to me. And I know that's like what they did with Luke in The Last Jedi. It's like you take a character and you put him off on a slightly less heroic place.
Right.
I get that, but that's something I'm looking forward to seeing in this movie. Just from the trailer, it feels like we've got a little bit more of like, badass Laurie, as opposed to just tortured, isolated Laurie. But if it's against some kind of copycat, that changes it a little. But I can't imagine that that's going to be the case for an entire movie if this is the end of their big trilogy.
I agree.
So and what I liked about Kills was how mean Michael was, and that there were just some good sequences of Michael going around and fucking shit up. I'm hoping that we get that in this movie, that at least there's some good creative use of just whatever's lying around, whatever weapons are handy. Let's get introduced to some obnoxious people that 5 minutes later they're dead. Let's just just give us a little bit of that. Michael Myers.
It seems like there's plenty of that in the trailer.
Right. Well, it's like there's still the power of just that face coming out of the shadows is still gets me. It's still more powerful than like seeing Jason come out or Freddy come out to me. Like the image of Michael Myers still has some power. So I'm excited to see what they might have in mind, even if they've shown us twice now that what they have in mind might not seem that different. It's kind of just about the execution and maybe bringing it into the modern day. But nobody thinks this is really going to be the last one, especially if it's successful. So,
yeah, couple weeks, we'll know.
Yeah, true.
Evil will die that day.
Yeah,
it didn't die that other night.
No, it didn't.
Yeah.
The night he came home, Evil didn't die.
Yeah. All right, cool. Well, I guess we can wrap it up at that. Anything else you guys want to mention? Any other last minute things you've seen that you wanted to say anything about?
Not on my end.
Not me.
Just a comment. Like we've got a for those looking for horror and like, you know, in the month ahead, you know, in Halloween month, like John mentioned, Pearl and Barbarians in theaters. You know, this week Smile comes out, which has been getting really good reviews, which has been described as like a cross of like The Ring and It Follows, which just sounds like an amazing marriage to me. Yeah, it had its premiere. I think it's Fantastic Fest. And
it's got that one gag in the trailer where the head swings down. Where you're expecting the head to look down, but instead it kind of swings down. Yeah, that's pretty.
But it's been getting like amazing reviews, which just makes me excited. But yeah, like you get that, and Halloween ends, and we've got Mike Flanagan's Midnight Club series coming out on Netflix in a couple weeks. The Hellraiser movie, which actually, as we're recording this, they just revealed is a secret screening at Fantastic Fest happening now. So like that's coming out on Hulu. You know, there's just all these great properties coming
Guillermo
out.
Del Toro's anthology series is coming out on Netflix.
Oh, right, too. Netflix, right, exactly. There's just a lot of great stuff in the next couple of weeks. So, you know, we're eating good in the next few weeks. The horror fans listening to this podcast, we're got a few great weeks ahead of us. So yeah, I'm excited to see that stuff. Talk about it here. I'm just very excited for this time of year, and it seems like we'll have a lot of fun stuff to watch. Movieschmovie.com is the website. You can go there to subscribe to the podcast on whatever podcast platform you choose to use on your mobile device or your computer, whatever it is, your car. But you can also go to YouTube and subscribe there. All the socials linked from movieschmovie.com. If you want to see the video element of this podcast, make sure if you go there, you hit the like and subscribe button.
If you're looking at us,
the updates. Yeah, hi. There'll be like a little bell or a subscribe like thing right around this area. I think somewhere in that ballpark. Hit it so you get the alerts when they come out. And otherwise, we'll be back next week with some more conversations about movies and TVs and news, TV shows rather, and news. And I'm sure probably something Marvel's going to creep its way into the conversation. It always does. But also, as always, you've made our day. Thanks.
Bye.